Chapter 4. The Runaway Trolley. It was extra hot and sunny the next morning, which made the concrete playground feel like a bright stone desert and made my legs feel lazy. Will met me at our usual spot, but he was quieter than normal. I knew he was blaming me for getting us chased out to the park by the old trolley man. Katie was probably thinking the exact same thing, so it was a good thing I had a plan that was going to surprise them. I wanted to tell them both together, but since Katie never came to school on time, I needed to wait till first break. As we stood against our part of the school wall, waiting for the first bell to ring, Will kicked at something invisible on the floor and said, "So, did you hear about the robbery last night?" "Yeah," I said, feeling glad that he'd talked first. "But it's just a stupid bear statue with a kid's book. Who cares?" No, not that one," Will said, shaking his head. "The Paddington statue was the first robbery. There was a second robbery last night. Some angel statue was taken from that posh fridge shop in town." "Fridge shop?" I asked, watching Randy trying to hide behind his dad as he walked through the school gates. Randy was one of our regulars and always paid us with sweets to leave him alone. I gave him a long stare to let him know that I had seen him and that he now owed me 3 extra bars of chocolate for trying to hide. "Yeah, Selfridges. They've got quite a big statue of a queen in front of the shop, except this queen has got like wings and she was like carrying a tiny angel. That's what the thief stole. Mum can't stop talking about it. She says all the department stores are going to be paranoid now as loads of them have got statues," said Will. I was only half listening, really. I was watching Randy trying to disappear into his dad's legs. "And Mum said that the thief left a sign in yellow paint too, like he's telling everyone he was really there. So cool. And the statue's like pure gold. If I was him, I'd break it into small pieces and sell them off and buy like 50 cars and like race them around all day." "Hey, what's that?" I looked down at my rucksack and I saw the corner of Hercules' bandit eye mask poking out. "Oh, nothing," I said, pushing it back and the black hoodie that I'd stuffed on top of my books back down into the bag, quickly zipping it up before Will could ask me anything else. I said, "Oh, look, there's Lavinia. Doesn't she owe us some pocket money?" "Yeah," Will nodded, following my gaze to the tall, skinny girl who could quite easily disappear behind a lamppost and often tried to whenever she saw us coming. As soon as Will spotted her, we grabbed our bags and we chased her until she ended up trying to hide behind a dustbin. But before we could get anything from her, the school bell rang, making everyone stop what they were doing and hurry towards the doors. "Hey, H," said Will, as we waited at the end of all of the lines so we could be the last ones to go in. "Are we going to get, like, the trolley man back today? How about we collect some leftovers off everyone's plates at lunchtime to throw at him?" "I've got a better plan," said I, shaking my head. "You'll see." When we got into the classroom, Will went and sat down at his table on the opposite side of the room from me, and I sat at mine. Miss Vergara never lets me and Will and Katie sit together. That's why I have to sit next to Rajesh, who's so scared of me that he just stares at me with these huge saucery eyes, and behind Mei Lee, who annoys me with every flick of her ponytail. "Right, everyone, homework out, please," said Miss Vergara, clapping her hands. I could see Mei Lee hurrying to rip open her bag and get out her homework book. Mei Lee's homework book was covered with perfect shiny wrapping paper and perfect handwriting and perfect stickers, making it glow like a big square trophy under the classroom lights. It made me want to pull her hair extra hard. I didn't bother opening up my bag. Well, there wasn't any point. Didn't have any homework anyway to hand in. Plus, I had a bandit mask and a hoodie in there, and I didn't want anyone to see it. "Hector," said Miss Vergara, standing in front of me with an open hand, waiting for me to put something in it. The whole class turned to look at me, which made me grin. "Your homework, please." "Where is it?" said Miss Vergara. Shrugged. Cat ate it, I said. I could hear Will sniggering from the other side of the classroom, but he had been a chicken and given something in. I'd seen him do it. Really? Asked Miss Vergara, dropping her hand and her head to one side. The cat ate your homework again? This one really seems to like anything we do on the Tudors, doesn't it? Yes, miss, I said. I guess it thinks we're doing work on tuna, not the Tudors. Ah! From someone behind me, I could hear Katie start to giggle, which meant that she must have been able to sneak in without getting caught, thanks to me. Mrs. Vergara's brown skin flushed red. Up you get, she said. You know the drill. Off you go. I have not got the patience to deal with you today. I did know the drill. So I got up, grabbed my rucksack, headed for the door. The drill is going and sitting outside Mr. Lancaster's office until he can find time to tell me off, and then going back to class so I can get told off for missing all the lessons I've just been made to miss. I've been doing the drill since my very first day at school. I actually don't mind it because I get to skip lessons and I watch everyone else going up and down the corridors. Sometimes, if Mr. Lancaster's busy and Mr. Ferguson, his secretary, isn't around, I even get to scare kids passing by as well. I once got like 3 chocolate bars just by sitting outside Mr. Lancaster's office. But today, instead of watching the corridors to see who I could go after, I decided to use the drill for something else. Sitting outside the main office, I pulled out my half-empty homework book and I turned to the back and I began to draw out cartoon strips. It was a plan of what I was going to do to the old trolley man. After I'd drawn 3 strips that made my plan nice and clear, I waited for the drill to finish. But Mr. Lancaster made me wait so long I even missed my first break, and I think he only let me go for lunch because it was probably against the law to starve students, even me. Catching up with Will and Katie in the canteen, I told them all about my plan. Oh, that's really cool, said Katie. The old man's going to cry so hard. Yeah, said Will, so hard. You sure you can run fast enough, though? Asked Katie. I mean, like, real fast? Because if you don't and he catches you, you are going to be in, like, so much trouble, even with your mask on. She leaned forwards and stared at me hard through her glasses, like 2 one-eyed goldfishes looking through their bowls. Oh, and get caught, I said angrily. You'll see. I was too annoyed to eat any of the extra pizza slices Katie had stolen off the other tables. I couldn't wait to prove to Katie and Will that I was faster and cleverer than they would ever be. I'd show them. I'd show everyone. I didn't want to get detention and be kept behind, so all afternoon in class I sat on my hands and I waited for the last bell of the day to ring. After Mrs. Vergara asked everyone at least 324 questions about things that would never matter, the bell finally rang and she told us we could all go home. I jumped up first, yelling, "Come on!" to Will and Katie as I ran out the door and down the half-empty corridor. All the classes were only just starting to come out. Usually I like to push and bump people as I walk past, but I was in way too much of a rush today. Katie and Will ran behind me as we made our way out into the playground, through the school gates and across the big road. We slowed down as we reached the tall green gates of the park. Keep a lookout, I warned, dumping my rucksack on the floor. I took out my hoodie and my Hercules eye mask. Quickly, I pulled my hoodie on, placed the elasticated band of the bandit mask over my head, lining up the eye holes perfectly. And for the final touch, I pulled up the hood of my hoodie over my head, just like I had done drawn in my cartoon strips. "Whoa, you look really cool," said Will, "like Zorro, but like in a hoodie." Katie didn't say anything, but I could tell that she thought I looked cool too. I strapped my rucksack back on and I grinned at Katie and Will, who both grinned back. I could tell they were feeling as excited as I was now. "Let's go halfway up and see if he's there," I said, as we began walking towards the oak trees and the old men's bench. "Stay in front of me so no one can see me." "Where is is he?" asked Will, frowning as we got halfway up the hill. I looked ahead. The old man's trolley was parked in its usual place right next to the bench, but the old man, he was nowhere to be seen. I beamed under my mask. This was going to make my plan even easier. Not only had the old man gone and left his trolley behind, but the park around us was like empty of anyone else too. There wasn't even a single annoying dog. It was as if everything was working out right there for me, perfectly. Finally. "Stay here," I ordered, feeling so lucky that I was sure nothing could touch me. Pulling my hood tighter around my face, I ran at top speed up the hill towards the trolley and I grabbed the handles. And with a grunt, I pushed it onto the long winding pathway that led down the other side of the hill and deeper into the park. I tried to hurry, but actually it was much heavier than I thought it was going to be, and the wheels were so old and wobbly that they felt as if they were about to fall off any old second. "Hey, what are you doing?" I looked over my shoulder and I could see the old man running towards me from the trees behind the bench. He was carrying a crumpled brown bag in one hand and a half-eaten sandwich in the other, and a large white crumb was falling like fluffy hailstones from his beard. My stomach jolted as if it had decided to go for a bungee jump without me. I began to run faster, forcing the trolley along the path, gripping onto the handlebar tight. I tried to steer it towards the trees, but it began to twist and turn like it got a brain of its own. The old man was still running behind me and shouting louder and louder. I knew I could outrun him. All I had to do was to let go of the trolley and make a dash for the park gates. But no matter how hard I tried to tell myself to do it, I couldn't make my fingers open. The trolley was like pulling me along now, and instead of me pushing it, I felt my legs begin to stumble and scrape across the ground. I swung my legs up into the air and tried to balance them on top of the wheels, but they weren't wide enough. Suddenly there was a woman with a dog in the way and a man with a pram and a kid with a ball. I began to scream at them, "Get out of the way!" But all that came out was, "Get out! Oi!" cried the woman with the dog. "Watch it!" shouted the man with the pram. "Whoa!" said the kid, throwing her ball up in the air and leaping out the way. "Get out!" I screamed as the trolley roared like a roller coaster down the hill. Beyond my control, my hood slipped and I tried to pull it back up with my left hand, and my right hand slid off the trolley handle. Before I knew it, what had happened, the trolley completely had escaped. I was just like flat on the ground. The trolley shot away like a giant silver bullet and bumped and jumped and rattled and spilled all the way down the rest of the hill. I got to my feet and watched, my mouth wide open, as the trolley's wheels swerved around the path and headed straight towards the lake. "My trolley!" cried the man. "Someone please!" shouted the man as he cut across the grass. He ran past me down the hill to try and catch it. But the trolley was too quick and everyone was too scared, as if it like sprouted invisible wings. The trolley flew through the air and a few seconds later, splash! The trolley had landed smack bang in the middle of the lake. I slowly got to my feet, watching as the trolley sank deeper and deeper. Newspapers and plastic bags floated and bobbed like extra large pieces of brightly coloured bread that had just been thrown in for a giant invisible duck. Just as it disappeared completely, the old man reached the edge of the lake and stumbled to a stop, his arms outstretched, as though for a single moment he thought he could still try and catch the trolley somehow. Then they dropped to his side. I waited for him to shout and scream, but he didn't. Instead, he just took off his yellow hat and his shoulders began to shake. And that's how I knew he was crying. "How could you do that?" asked a voice from behind me. I turned round. It was Mei Lee. As I looked back at her, I slowly raised my hands and touched my face where my eye mask was. It was gone. It must have snapped off when I got thrown off the trolley. I wanted to tell her to get lost and that it was none of her business, and if she told anyone she'd be in so much trouble that she wouldn't know where to run. But before I could say a word, the woman with the dog, who jumped out the way, shouted, "Hey, that's the boy who did it!" and began to run at full speed towards me. I took a look at Mei Lee, and then at the woman coming for me with the dog, and I began to sprint away from all of them as fast as I could. Chapter 5. The Two Treasures. "Oh man, that was wicked," said Will. He and Katie were waiting for me outside the park gates. I signalled at them to keep on running in case that woman with the dog was still after me, and we sprinted off down the street. We didn't stop until my lungs felt as if they were trying to push themselves out of my chest. I looked over my shoulder while I tried to catch my breath, but there was no one on the road behind us. Oh, gasped Katie, who was laughing, trying to breathe at the same time. "His face! And the splash! And, oh my gosh, the way your legs were like everywhere." "Yeah, they looked like road runners' legs. They were moving so fast," added Will, trying to do an impression of a giant bird with a hurricane for legs. I smiled back, but I didn't laugh. My plan had gone wrong. I'd never planned on making the trolley sink in the lake. I just wanted to hide it in the trees and maybe tip some of the stuff out so the old man had to spend ages finding it again. I was supposed to, disappear before anyone saw my face, a bit like the statue thief. That was the whole point of my hoodie and the bandit mask. Everything had gone wrong. But I didn't want to seem like a loser in front of Will and Katie again, so instead I pretended that pushing the trolley into the lake had been my master plan all along. "Yeah, you didn't see that coming," I said. "Yeah, he won't be coming back to any time soon." "You are a legend, H," said Will. We'd reached his road, so he thumped me on the arm and he turned to leave, giving me a salute, and he added, "No one on the planet could top that. We're gonna own that bench. We should get a sign telling everyone it's ours now." "Yeah, I can't wait for the whole school to hear what you did," said Katie as she turned to leave too. "I might even try and get in on time tomorrow just to spread the word." And after that, they left. I decided to take the long way home so I didn't have to go back near the park. The woman and the dog might have called the police by now. She had got quite a good look at me, and Maylie knew it was me too. She was definitely going to tell on me. She hated me almost as much as I hated her, and then the police would find the mask and test it for DNA, and then they come and arrest me at school, and I'd be on the news and locked up and probably become one of the Secret Service's top criminals of all time. Oh, I hurried home as fast as I could, and when I got in, I ran straight upstairs to take off my hoodie. "Hector, is that you?" It was Dad. But he wasn't supposed to get back from his work trip to Amsterdam until tomorrow. I quickly kicked my rucksack under my desk and stuffed my hoodie into the back of my wardrobe. "Hector, come down right now," he shouted. He was calling from his studio. Whenever Dad wanted to see anyone in his studio, it meant trouble. I could hear the news channels from his multiple television screens playing, even from my room. That was a sure sign I was in big trouble. Dad only ever watched the news channel when he was angry. A horrible feeling began to swirl around in the pit of my stomach. What if there was a live report about what I'd just done? A trolley flying into a pond was sure to make the news, especially if someone had recorded it on their phone and sent the video to the reporters. I slowly made my way downstairs and I stood at the very edge of Dad's studio door. The kitchen door was shut, and I could hear Helen and Hercules and Lisa talking about something and laughing behind it. I knew that Mum wasn't home from her trip yet because none of her shoes were lying like abandoned soldiers on the landing. It was just going to be me and Dad. "Come in," he said. He was sitting in his large leather chair. I took a single step into the room. "Close the door," ordered Dad. His glasses were perched right on the end of his nose. Dad always wore his glasses like that, which made them look as if they were balancing on the edge of a cliff, wondering whether or not to jump. I did as he said, and I stood looking at my feet. Dad never let me into his studio unless he was angry with me, because he said he didn't want me to ruin anything. It was filled with endless piles of books about famous documentary makers, and by the window was a large table that had so many piles of paper on it you couldn't see the table at all. The walls were all covered with big black and white posters of people he'd never told me the names of, except for the wall above the desk, which had 2 large televisions on it. It was the only room in the house that had televisions hanging on the wall as if they were like paintings. So, do you have anything to say about what you've done? Asked Dad, watching me from his chair. I shook my head without looking at him. I wondered how he already knew and how many years I was going to be grounded for pushing a homeless man's trolley into a lake. Mrs. Vergara was rather upset when she rang me, and I don't blame her. I looked up, my heart screeching to a halt inside me. Mrs. Vergara? How'd she found out so quickly? I glanced up at the television screens to see if I was on the news already, but it was just like a woman in a grey suit with pictures of a graph next to her on one screen, and there was a weatherman on the other screen. Well, she's emailed me, and your mum the drawing that you did, continued Dad, crossing his legs. She says that you haven't even had the decency to apologise. In a flash I realised he wasn't talking about the trolley at all. What with everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten about the picture Mrs. Vergara had taken off me yesterday, the one I hadn't even drawn. But that wasn't me, I said. And I suppose putting rubber snakes in the lunch soup wasn't you either, eh? Asked Dad, calmly raising a single eyebrow. Well, yeah, that was, but not another word, please, said Dad, making his right hand into a stop sign. Since you can't say the words, you can write them down in a letter. Oh, I'm not writing a letter to Mrs. Vergara, I cried. Everyone will think I'm giving her like a love letter. I don't care if they think you're proposing marriage to her. You will write it and you will give it to her in front of your class first thing tomorrow. Unless you want me to ground you for a whole month and confiscate your skateboard and those computer games you love so much. I opened my mouth to tell Dad that I wouldn't apologise for anything I hadn't done, not ever, and that Mrs. Vergara and Mr. Lancaster and everyone else who hated me could frankly get lost. But before I could say anything, Dad stood up with a sigh and he put his hands on both of my shoulders. Why can't you be more like your sister? He asked, shaking his head. Do you know how lucky you are to have a roof over your head and all the comforts me and your mother can possibly give you? Do you know what some people would give just to have a home like this every night? No, you don't. You should come and meet some of the people I'm filming for my latest project. There are people out there who go hungry days on end, who have nothing but a street corner for their home, and here you are making a complete mess of everything. I felt my whole face become red. I hadn't even known that Dad's new film was about homeless people. I couldn't get away from them. There was a fizzing in my ears like a firework about to go off. Dad's gaze moved to something over my shoulder and he suddenly said, Here, take a look at this. Turning me round, he pointed to the television on the right and, grabbing the remote control from his desk, he increased the volume. The sound of applause rang across the room. On the screen, a tall, slim man with wavy grey hair and a big white smile that shone almost as bright as his pinky ring was handing a giant cheque to a small woman in a bright orange cardigan. And behind her, the Mayor of London, whose face was always on giant posters everywhere, telling us that he was making London better, and he was politely clapping. At the bottom of the TV screen flashed the words, Sir Nesbitt gives £5 million to homeless shelter in St Albans and backs Mayor Bainbridge's new law. Now that's the kind of man you should be aspiring to be like, said Dad, his hands on my shoulders getting heavier and heavier. Someone who shares what he has to help make the world better for people, not worse. I wanted to say that I didn't see how me sharing my old size 3 trainers or computer games could ever make anyone's better world, but I bit my tongue instead. I was in enough trouble already, and that was without anyone knowing about the trolley in the lake yet. I watched as Sir Nesbit and the mayor proudly pushed the short woman in the orange cardigan to the side, and they shook each other's hands. Flicking the screen off, Dad removed his glasses and pinched the top of his nose together with 2 fingers. That was a sign that the lecture was nearly over. You are going to write that letter after tea. You will show it to me, and then tomorrow you will give it to Mrs. Vergerer, and I am going to check that she got it, okay? I stood still and I didn't reply. I wasn't ever going to write an apology for something I didn't even do. Okay? Asked Dad louder. I gave a half nod with my fingers crossed tightly behind my back. Just then, Hercules came running into the room and grabbed one of my dad's legs in a hug. "Daddy, come and play," ordered Hercules. Smiling at him, my dad let himself be pulled out into the corridor without looking back at me. I stayed where I was. I wanted to kick the wall so hard that the whole house would fall down. Who cares that I hadn't drawn that stupid picture, or that I hadn't meant to set fire to that hotel room, or all the times I got into trouble without ever meaning to? No one cared. No one. No one cared about the truth. Everyone always assumed I was guilty. So, let the woman with the dog and trolley man and Maylie tell on me and the police. Then Dad would see just how much of a mess I could really make. Couldn't wait to see his face then. He was out there making stupid documentaries about homeless people, and I was throwing their stuff in the lake. "Hector, come on," said Hercules, jump-hopping back into the room again, tugging me by the arm. I didn't want to go, but he kept on pulling. "Lisa's made pancakes to celebrate Daddy getting back early," he said. Hercules led me to the kitchen and then went and sat on Dad's lap. I didn't really want to eat in the kitchen at all, but it was a silent rule in the house that whenever Mum or Dad were home, we had to all eat together. Lisa put a huge plate of fresh hot pancakes topped with peanut butter and bananas in the middle of the table, and the smell of it did make my stomach growl. "Thanks, Lisa. So, Helen, what's all this about your book trip being cancelled?" Dad asked as he poured Hercules a big glass of milk. Helen chewed and swallowed extra fast as she couldn't wait an extra second for her mouth to make space for all the important words it was about to say. "Well, it was because Paddington Bear got stolen by that thief." I leaned over and took 3 large pancakes for myself as she went on in a rush. "So the police are boarding up all the major statues in all the major stations, and the book trail has to be cancelled for every single school in the country. That means we can't get our slip signed to say we've done it, and that means we can't get any of the Duchess of Wales badges we've been working for." "What a shame," I muttered, wondering how anyone could care about anything so boring. I grabbed another 2 pancakes, and Hercules copied me and took 2 too. It made me grin and gave him a wink. "Oh, yes, I've heard about the plight of poor old Paddington Bear," chuckled Dad, "and the golden angel from Selfridge's," he added, shaking his head. "What strange things to steal." "Well, the news said that the thief had left special marks and that only homeless people can understand the marks," said Helen in her extra annoying know-it-all voice. "In bright yellow paint. Caris said that her dad said it was definite proof that some homeless bums was doing the stealing." Hercules giggled and whispered. "Bums," he said to me. Lisa poured more pancake mix into a hot pan and scolded. "Hercules, don't say bum at the table." "That's right, Hercules, it isn't very nice when we're eating," said Dad. "And Helen, Caris's dad is wrong to call homeless people that. In fact, it's despicable." "Despicable?" whispered Hercules to himself as he mashed a banana up with his fork. Helen nodded. "Sorry, Dad, but do you know anything about the signs? I mean, what do they mean? I told Caris that you would know because you're doing a film about it." Dad's smiled. He perched his glasses even closer to the tip of his nose. He loved it when Helen was extra sickening and acted interested in his precious films. I never usually listened when he talked about them because they weren't really proper films like the ones you go to see in the cinema. They just had loads of people no one knew talking with sad music in the background. But this time I did keep my ears open because I wanted to know about the yellow signs too. Well, homeless people do sometimes draw signs on walls and bridges, said Dad. It's like a secret code. It's a way of letting other homeless people know if a place is safe or dangerous, or if there are people there who will help them or call the police on them. Things like that. It's strange a homeless thief would expose the codes to the public, though. It goes against the homeless people's rules. He leaned back in his chair. Did you know George Orwell was... As Dad began to talk about yet another famous person who was so famous I'd never even heard of them, I gulped down my last mouthful of pancakes, reached for the milk bottle. The gulp was so loud it actually made Dad stop talking. Hector! Come on now, why can't you eat like a normal person? He asked, shaking his head at me. Yeah, said Helen, nearly putting another slice of pancake into her mouth as if she was practising to be the next Queen of England. You're like an animal, said Helen. He's not an animal, said Hercules, scowling at Helen. Hello, my treasures, sang Mum's voice from down the hallway. Mum! Cried Hercules, jumping down from Dad's lap. Mum threw open the kitchen door and gave him a kiss on the top of his head and then planted another one on Helen's head. What are you all talking about? She asked, looking around, spotting the pancakes. She threw off her coat and grabbed a plate. Oh, Lisa, you are a star. I've had a beastly day. Is the kettle on by any chance? Oh, Hector, I got another call from Mr. Lancaster. Honestly, is it too much to ask for you to keep your nose out of trouble just for a few seconds? It's okay, Leonora, said Dad. We've had a chat. Hector is going to write a letter of apology to Mrs. Vergerer as soon as he's done massacring the pancakes. Helen gave a snigger. I glared at her and wondered what they would all do if I told them that I had just come home from pushing a homeless man's trolley into the bottom of a lake. Maybe they wouldn't even be surprised. They already thought I was a menace, just like everyone else at school did. I knew they wished that I wasn't even around. So I got up, and leaving them all behind in the kitchen together, I ran back upstairs to my room. I slammed my door shut tight. I switched on my computer and pulled out my headphones, letting the sounds of the game drown out my thoughts of everyone downstairs, and the letter I was never going to write, and the homeless thief nobody could stop talking about, and the fact that Maylie could be calling the police on me right now. And as I entered my latest universe, I tried my best to forget about the old man in the park too. The one who, thanks to me, would now be sleeping on his bench without a trolley full of rubbish by his side.